Welcome to Deconstructing a Fairytale, embarrassingly in-depth thoughts about Disney movies from two Disney parents.
And fans.
Hosted by us, Jared and Jill Belcher. So we are starting this podcast because, honestly, we love Disney movies.
Yeah, we grew up on Disney movies, and now we're raising a family of our own and thinking a little bit more critically about what our kids watch.
Yeah, and not just critically is this appropriate?
Yeah.
Like that, of course. But also we were watching Cars the other day, and I noticed there was this Latin phrase above the door in the courtroom, and I was like, wait, I think that in Latin says the road to justice is straight, and looked it up. Sure enough, it's not that's not perfect Latin, but that's the meaning they're trying to get across. There are all these details in these movies, and now that we're watching them so often, we are just thinking a lot about Disney movies.
And on repeat, I would say.
On repeat.
Often and over again.
Exactly. So, which is kind of cool because these are, obviously real people with real lives have brought a part of their own experience and put them into these movies. So there is more in depth that you can uncover when you start thinking more critically about them. And that's kind of what we want to do with this podcast. We're going to talk about the powerful messages that are there, some of the complicated characters. Sometimes there are confusing plot points we're going to talk about. Connection to real life events, of course, informing the movie.
Yeah.
I don't think it was planned at all, but Raya, they really talk about how the Droon are a plague that is spreading across the land, and that came out in the midst of the pandemic. So the kind of the connections that are happening there. We're going to talk about all of those. It's interesting to think about fairy tales are usually traditionally the ways that parents conveyed a moral lesson to their kids. Some of the fairy tales we tell today, even Cinderella or Little Mermaid, the original versions are super creepy, the Brothers Grimm's version, but they're teaching, trying to teach kids hey, don't do this or you'll get murdered by a sea witch, right? Trying to convey moral lessons through these really creepy stories. Nowadays, these movie fairy tales are way less creepy, but they're still serving that kind of similar purpose of what's the meaning? What's the underlying story? And so that's what we're going to get to in this podcast.
Yeah, so...
And frankly, our friends are tired of hearing us talk about these things.
Yeah, we have these discussions, so...
We're you know what? There's an audience. Someone else is having these conversations, and maybe they want to be a part of that conversation with us. So we're going to talk about some of these questions. We're going to basically go through one movie at a time, one Disney movie at a time, and just explore, I don't know how long, 45 minutes, an hour. We're going to just dive into the movie and talk about the deeper messages there. What on earth does Ariel see in the dopey Prince Eric?
Yeah.
Or what's the deal with Elsa and her mom, and Elsa being this quote fifth spirit who is what calling to herself from what is the river?
Montahala.
Yeah, Montahala.
Yeah.
What's the deal? She's calling to herself. I'm sorry. What?
I don't know.
They clearly don't know what's going on.
I know.
So we're gonna talk about some of these things. I don't know. All these different movies, one movie at a time. So join us on this podcast, Jared and Jill, as we deconstruct Disney films and find what's under the surface.